I'm Callie, 28. Everyone's celebrating around me because my grandfather just died and left them millions. Meanwhile, I'm holding an old yellow envelope instead of a check. Apparently, being the family disappointment comes with matching compensation. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt like the black sheep of your family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and broken dreams. Well, broken for me anyway. Everyone else looked like they'd just won the lottery, which I guess they had. My stepmother, Patricia, kept dabbing her eyes with the tissue, but honestly, those tears looked about as real as her concern for Grandpa when he was alive. And finally, the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses, to Callie Morrison, "Here it comes," I thought. The big moment where I find out Grandpa left me his collection of dusty books, or maybe his old fishing rod. Something appropriately sentimental for the granddaughter who actually spent time with him. Instead, he handed me this yellowed envelope. No fanfare, no explanation, just this. I stared at it while around me people were already making plans for their windfall. Lily, my stepsister, got $2 million. $2 million! For someone who couldn't even remember Grandpa's middle name? My stepmother scored the house in Martha's Vineyard, worth at least $3 million. Even distant cousins I barely knew walked away with seven-figure checks. And me? I got what looked like something Grandpa found in his junk drawer. The silence stretched long enough for everyone to notice. Patricia broke it first, naturally. "Well," she said, not even trying to hide her smirk, "I suppose Harold remembered you after all, dear." The way she said "dear" made it sound like a curse word. Lily leaned over, pretending to be helpful. "Maybe it's instructions for his burial plot maintenance? Someone has to take care of it, right?" Her laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. I turned the envelope over in my hands. My name was written on it in Grandpa's shaky handwriting, but there was something else too. A small notation in the corner that I couldn't quite make out. "Aren't you going to open it?" asked Uncle Richard, barely concealing his curiosity. They were all watching now, like vultures circling roadkill. "Later," I said quietly, slipping it into my purse. That was apparently the wrong answer. "Oh, come on," Patricia said. "We're all family here. What could be so secret?" The word family hit different coming from her. This woman who'd spent 15 years making sure I knew I didn't really belong, who served Lily's favorite meals while I made my own sandwiches, who displayed Lily's achievements on the refrigerator while mine somehow always got lost. "I'm sure it's nothing important," I said, standing up. "Probably just a sentimental note." But as I walked to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this envelope than met the eye. And judging by the way some people were watching me leave, I wasn't the only one who thought so. The ride home was like a highlight reel of my entire life. Every red light reminded me of another moment when I was the afterthought. The consolation prize, the one who got the leftovers. I'd barely made it through my front door when my phone started buzzing. Lily, obviously. "So," she said, without even a hello, "what was in the mystery envelope? I haven't opened it yet." "Right." The skepticism in her voice could have powered a small city. "Well, when you do, just remember that family helps family. Grandpa probably left you some kind of responsibility knowing him. Family helps family. Rich, coming from someone who'd borrowed $3,000 from me last year and conveniently forgot to pay it back. I'll keep that in mind," I said. "Good, because Patricia and I were talking, and we think you should contribute to the memorial service. I mean, it's only fair since you got whatever that was." And there it was. The assumption that even in death, Grandpa's legacy was somehow my financial responsibility while they enjoyed the actual inheritance. After I hung up, I sat on my couch staring at the envelope for a full hour. Part of me was scared to open it. What if it really was just a goodbye note? What if this was Grandpa's way of gently letting me know that even he thought I didn't measure up to the rest of the family? But another part of me, the part that remembered helping him organize his papers and listening to his stories, knew that Harold Morrison was never gentle about anything. If he wanted to tell me something, he'd be direct about it. I carefully opened the seal. Inside was a single piece of paper with a phone number written in his handwriting. Nothing else. No note, no explanation, just 10 digits that could have belonged to anyone. My phone rang before I could even process what I was looking at. Lily again. "So?" she demanded. "So what? Don't play dumb. What did he leave you?" I looked at the paper again. A phone number. The silence on her end was delicious. "A phone number?" she finally sputtered. "That's it? That's it. Well," she said, and I could practically hear her brain trying to turn this into something that made sense. "It's probably for some charity he wanted you to donate to, or maybe a care facility he thought would be good for you. Leave it to Lily to turn even a mystery into an insult." Must be some kind of charity for lost causes, she continued, laughing at her own joke. Knowing Grandpa, he probably thought you needed professional help figuring out your life. Thanks for the insight, I said. I'll definitely keep that in mind. But as I hung up, something in my chest was shifting. Not hurt. I was used to Lily's comments. Something else. Something that felt almost like anticipation. Because Harold Morrison had never done anything without a reason, and he'd certainly never left anything to chance. 3 days later, curiosity finally won. I mean, what was the worst that could happen? If it really was some charity number, at least I'd know. If it was a cruel joke from beyond the grave, well, it wouldn't be the first disappointment in my life. I dialed the number on a Tuesday morning, expecting voicemail or maybe some bored receptionist. Instead, a warm voice answered on the second ring. Morrison residence. My heart stopped. I'm sorry, I think I have the wrong number. I was trying to reach. Is this Callie? The voice interrupted gently. Yes, but I don't understand. I've been waiting for your call, dear. My name is James Whitfield. I was your grandfather's attorney for 43 years. His private attorney? Private attorney? The man at the reading had been from some big corporate firm. I don't understand, I said again. Your grandfather anticipated you might be confused. Would you be able to meet me this afternoon? I have some things to discuss with you that couldn't be handled in the formal reading. Something in his voice made me sit up straighter. There was a gravity there, a weight that suggested this wasn't about burial plots or charity donations. Is this about the envelope? Among other things, yes. Are you familiar with Morrison and Associates? I nearly dropped the phone. Morrison and Associates was Grandpa's company. The company that had made him wealthy enough to leave everyone those generous checks. The company that, according to family legend, would eventually pass to someone worthy enough to run it. Someone like Lily, who'd spent years talking about her business degree and her plans to modernize the operation. Someone definitely not like me, with my art history degree and my job managing a small gallery downtown. Yes, I managed to say. Excellent. Could you meet me at the downtown office at 3? There's quite a bit to discuss. The Morrison and Associates building was one of those impressive glass towers that made me feel underdressed just walking through the lobby. James Whitfield turned out to be exactly what I'd expected from his voice. Elderly, distinguished, with the kind of steady presence that probably made clients feel like their secrets were safe. His office was nothing like the sterile conference room where we'd heard the will reading. This felt lived in, personal. Photos of Grandpa and various business associates lined the walls, along with awards and certificates spanning decades. Please, sit, he said, gesturing to a comfortable leather chair. I imagine you have questions. A few, I said, which was the understatement of the century. He smiled. Your grandfather spoke about you often, you know. He was very proud of your independence, your work ethic. He said you were the only one who helped him without expecting anything in return. That stung a little, not because it wasn't true, but because it made all those afternoons organizing his files feel suddenly significant. Mr. Whitfield, why am I here? He reached into his desk and pulled out a key, an old-fashioned one, brass and heavy. Because, my dear, your grandfather left you considerably more than a phone number. The safety deposit box was in the basement of the oldest bank in the city. Mr. Whitfield led me through a maze of corridors that felt like something out of a movie, the kind where people keep family secrets and Swiss bank account numbers. Your grandfather was a very careful man, he said as we walked. He believed in being prepared for all possibilities. The box was larger than I'd expected. When Mr. Whitfield opened it, I found myself looking at stacks of documents, each one neatly labeled and organized. Classic Grandpa. I don't understand, I said for what felt like the 100th time today. Here, he said, pulling out a thick folder. Start with this. The label read, Callie's Inheritance, Primary Documents. Inside were papers I recognized but had never really paid attention to. Corporate filings, business licenses, stock certificates, all for Morrison and Associates. And all of them, every single one, had my name on them. This is impossible, I whispered. I assure you it's quite real. Your grandfather transferred ownership of Morrison and Associates to you 3 years ago, when you turned 25. Everything was done legally and properly, with all necessary documentation filed. I stared at the papers. But why didn't anyone know? Why wasn't this mentioned at the will reading? Mr. Whitfield's expression grew serious. Because your grandfather wanted to observe how the family behaved when they thought you'd been left out. Consider it his final test of character. A test they failed spectacularly, I said, thinking of Lily's comments about care facilities. Indeed, but there's more. He pulled out another folder. This one was labeled, Additional Assets, Protected Trusts. My hands were shaking now. Protected trusts? Your grandfather has been quietly moving money into managed trust accounts for years. Legal investments properly declared, but protected from, let's call them domestic complications. The numbers on these statements made my head spin. We weren't talking about thousands or even hundreds of thousands. The Morrison and Associates inheritance was worth $15 million on its own. The protected trust accounts held another $40 million. $55 million, I said out loud, just to see if it sounded real. 55 and a half, actually. Your grandfather's diversified investments did quite well over the past few years. I sank into the small chair beside the safety deposit box. This morning, I'd been Callie Morrison, gallery assistant, family disappointment, inheritor of mysterious phone numbers. Now I was, what exactly? Mr. Whitfield, this changes everything. Yes, he said simply. It does. But your grandfather chose you for specific reasons. He watched how you treated him when you thought there was nothing in it for you. He saw how you worked without expecting recognition or reward. Most importantly, he trusted that you would handle this responsibility with integrity. What about the family? What are they going to say when they find out? His smile was grim. I suspect they'll have quite a lot to say. But legally, there's nothing they can do. Everything is ironclad. As we walked back to his office, my mind was reeling. $55.5 million. A company worth millions more. All of it mine. Legitimately and legally. But more than that, it was Grandpa's final message to me. After years of being treated like I didn't matter, he'd made sure I'd never have to depend on anyone again. There's one more thing, Mr. Whitfield said as we reached his car. Your grandfather left specific instructions about when and how the family should be informed, which are entirely up to you. I decided to wait 3 weeks before telling anyone. Not out of spite exactly, but because I needed time to process what had happened. And honestly, because I wanted to watch them spend their inheritance money first. Lily was the most entertaining. She quit her job immediately, something about not needing to work for people who don't appreciate her vision. Over the first 6 months, she'd bought a luxury car, booked multiple European vacations, and started talking about investing significant amounts in startups that promised to revolutionize everything from social media to renewable energy. Patricia was more subtle, but equally predictable. Luxury spa treatments, designer shopping sprees, and immediate acceptance into the most exclusive country clubs. She kept mentioning how wonderful it was to finally have true financial freedom. The irony was delicious. I, meanwhile, had spent those 3 weeks meeting with financial advisors, lawyers, and the management team at Morrison and Associates. Turns out Grandpa had been running a remarkably successful business. The company had contracts with 3 major corporations, a stellar reputation in the industry, and a team of employees who genuinely respected what they were building. Your grandfather always said you had the best business instincts in the family, said Margaret Hopkins, the company's operations manager. Those afternoons you spent with him weren't just organizing files. You were absorbing how he analyzed contracts, handled client relationships, and made strategic decisions. He was essentially giving you an informal business education. It was surreal, having people treat my opinions as valuable. For years, family gatherings had featured lengthy discussions about business strategy and market trends that I was expected to listen to but never contribute to. Now I was discovering that not only could I contribute, but I was actually good at it. The reckoning came on a Thursday. I'd called a family meeting, telling everyone I had important news to share. They assumed it was about funeral arrangements or maybe selling Grandpa's belongings. We met at Patricia's house. Well, it was Grandpa's house, but she'd already started redecorating. The changes were subtle but unmistakable. New curtains, different furniture arrangements, fresh flowers everywhere. She was making the space her own. So, she said as everyone settled into the living room, "What's this about?" "I wanted to let you all know that I've taken over operations at Morrison and Associates." The silence was immediate and complete. Lily was the first to recover. "What do you mean, taken over operations?" "I mean, I'm running the company." "That's impossible," Uncle Richard said. "The business wasn't part of the will distribution." "You're right," I said. "It wasn't." I pulled out the documents Mr. Whitfield had given me, placing them on the coffee table like I was laying down a royal flush. Because Grandpa transferred ownership to me 18 months ago. The explosion was immediate and predictable. Voices raised, accusations flew, and Lily actually stood up and started pacing. "This has to be some kind of mistake," Patricia said, though her voice lacked conviction. "No mistake. It's all legal and properly documented." "But why?" Lily demanded. "What makes you think you can run a business? You work at an art gallery." And there it was, the fundamental assumption that had shaped my entire relationship with this family, that I was somehow less capable, less deserving, less worthy of success than anyone else in the room. I guess we'll find out, I said calmly. The meeting devolved from there, but I'd said what I needed to say. As I gathered my papers and headed for the door, I caught Patricia's expression in the hallway mirror. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely worried. Smart woman. 6 months later, the transformation was complete. Not just mine, though that was certainly dramatic enough, but the family's entire dynamic. Morrison and Associates was thriving under my leadership. We'd landed 2 new major accounts, implemented efficiency improvements that increased profits by 25%, and earned recognition from the business community for our innovative approaches to client service. I was featured in the Regional Business Journal as Young Entrepreneur to Watch. The same week that article came out, Lily's startup investment collapsed. Turns out revolutionizing social media is harder than it looks, especially when the companies you're funding don't actually have viable products. She lost $600,000 over 8 months. Patricia's luxury lifestyle and property maintenance had eaten through more of her inheritance than she'd anticipated. The Martha's Vineyard house needed extensive renovations. $200,000. Property taxes alone on both properties were running $80,000 annually. And maintaining the lifestyle that came with owning premium real estate was more expensive than she'd calculated. Uncle Richard had made the classic mistake of assuming that having money meant he was good with money. His investment portfolio, managed by a friend who turned out to be better at golf than finance, had lost 30% of its value over 18 months. I, meanwhile, was not only successfully running a multi-million-dollar company, but the trust accounts were growing steadily under professional management. The first request for help came from Lily. She called on a Tuesday afternoon, her voice carefully casual. "Hey, Cal. How's the business going?" "Very well," I said. "Thanks for asking." "That's great. That's really great. Listen, I was wondering, do you think there might be any opportunities at Morrison and Associates? I mean, now that you're running things..." The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. This from the woman who'd spent years telling anyone who'd listen that she was going to modernize Grandpa's old-fashioned business practices. "What kind of opportunity were you thinking about?" "Well, you know I have my MBA, and I've always been interested in the family business. Maybe something in management? Or strategic planning." Strategic planning. From someone who just lost her life savings to a social media scam. "I'll definitely keep that in mind," I said. "I'll need to see your resume, of course, and we'd have to go through the standard interview process." "Interview process?" Her voice climbed an octave. "But I'm family, which is exactly why everything needs to be done properly." The conversation ended with Lily promising to send her resume, though we both knew she never would. The idea of interviewing for a position at what she'd always considered her company was too humiliating to contemplate. Patricia's approach was more subtle. She started inviting me to dinner, asking about my work, showing interest in my life for the first time since I'd known her. During one of these carefully orchestrated conversations, she mentioned that managing 2 properties was more challenging than expected. "Have you considered selling the vineyard house?" I asked innocently. "Oh, I couldn't do that. It has so much sentimental value." Sentimental value. From someone who'd never spent more than a weekend there, when Grandpa was alive. "Of course," I said, "though I imagine the expenses add up quickly." "They do," she admitted. "But family legacy is more important than money." Family legacy. Another rich phrase from someone who'd spent years trying to erase my connection to that very legacy. As spring turned to summer, I watched the slow dissolution of their confidence. The money that had seemed infinite in January was feeling finite by June. The investments that were supposed to secure their futures were looking increasingly uncertain. And Morrison and Associates? Under my leadership, it was setting records for profitability and growth. Sometimes justice doesn't require revenge. Sometimes it just requires patience and competence. Have you ever watched karma work in real time? Drop a comment if you've seen instant justice. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You won't believe what happens when the family realizes just how wrong they were about me. By the 1-year mark, watching my family's financial unraveling had become my new favorite entertainment. Better than any reality TV show, really, because the drama was completely self-inflicted. Lily's second revolutionary investment had just crashed and burned. This time it was cryptocurrency mining, because apparently she thought digital currency was the same as printing money. She'd sunk another $400,000 into equipment that was now worth about as much as a collection of very expensive paperweights. "The market's just volatile right now," she explained to anyone who'd listen. "It's a temporary setback." Temporary, sure. Like the Titanic's encounter with that iceberg. Patricia was discovering that owning 2 multi-million-dollar properties wasn't quite the luxury lifestyle she'd imagined. The Martha's Vineyard house needed a new roof and foundation work, $180,000. The heating and cooling system in Grandpa's house was older than some small countries and decided to give up the ghost in February. Another 60,000. These old houses, she complained during one of our increasingly rare family gatherings. They're just money pits. I nodded sympathetically while internally calculating that Morrison and Associates had earned more in the past month than she'd inherit in total. Funny how perspective works. Uncle Richard had joined some exclusive investment club that promised insider knowledge and guaranteed returns. I'm pretty sure the only thing guaranteed was that he'd be parted from his money faster than he could say Ponzi scheme. He'd already lost 300,000 to these financial geniuses. Meanwhile, Morrison and Associates was being courted by a major international firm interested in a partnership deal, the kind of opportunity that could triple our revenue within 2 years. I was scheduled to fly to Chicago next month to meet with their executive team. Business travel must be exhausting, Patricia said when I mentioned the trip. Actually, I find it energizing. There's something exciting about building something that lasts. She gave me a look I couldn't quite read, like she was seeing me clearly for the first time and wasn't sure she liked what she saw. The real comedy gold came from watching them try to maintain appearances. Lily still talked about her investment portfolio as if it existed. Patricia continued hosting dinner parties, though I noticed the wine had gotten cheaper and the guest list shorter. Uncle Richard kept wearing his expensive suits while quietly selling off his watch collection. None of them had asked me for help yet, but I could feel it coming. There's a particular desperation that creeps into people's voices when they're running out of options. They weren't there yet, but they were getting close. The smart play would have been to liquidate everything and live modestly on what remained. But that would require admitting they'd made mistakes. And admitting mistakes had never been this family's strong suit. So instead, they doubled down on bad decisions and expensive habits, burning through their inheritances like tourists spending play money in Vegas. And me? I was building an empire. The first crack in their facade appeared at Thanksgiving, about 18 months after the inheritance. We were at Patricia's house. Sorry, Grandpa's house that Patricia was still managing to afford, and the strain was starting to show. Lily arrived in an Uber, which might not seem significant, unless you knew she'd bought that BMW 18 months ago. When I asked about the car, she waved dismissively. Oh, I sold it. Cars are just depreciating assets anyway. I'm being more strategic with my liquid investments now. Strategic. That's one way to describe liquidating assets to cover mounting investment losses. Patricia had clearly tried to recreate the elaborate Thanksgivings of years past, but something was off. The turkey was smaller, the wine selection limited, and she kept checking her phone with the worried expression of someone monitoring a bank balance. Callie, she said as we sat down to dinner, how's the business world treating you? It was the first time she'd asked about my work with what sounded like genuine interest, which immediately made me suspicious. Very well. We just signed a contract with Henderson Industries that should keep us busy through next summer. Henderson Industries? Uncle Richard perked up. I've heard they're expanding their operations. Lots of opportunity there. There is. We're hoping to grow our team significantly to handle the increased workload. I could practically see the wheels turning in their heads. Job opportunities, stable income, benefits packages. You know, Lily said carefully, I've been thinking about making a career change. The startup world is so unpredictable. Unpredictable. Like gravity is unpredictable. What kind of career change? I asked, though I already knew where this was heading. Something more stable, more traditional. I've always been interested in business operations. Business operations. Coming from someone who just discovered that cryptocurrency mining requires actual electricity, which costs actual money. The conversation continued in this vein throughout dinner, with various family members casually mentioning their newfound appreciation for stable employment, their respect for my business acumen, and their belief that family businesses were the backbone of American success. It was like watching a very polite mugging. After dinner, Patricia cornered me in the kitchen while I was helping with dishes. Another first. Usually she insisted on handling cleanup herself. Callie, I hope you know how proud we are of what you've accomplished over the past 2 years. Thank you, I said, continuing to scrape plates. It can't be easy, running a business at your age. If you ever need advice or support, or even just someone to bounce ideas off of. She trailed off, waiting for me to express gratitude for her sudden interest in mentoring me. The same woman who'd spent years dismissing my opinions on everything from dinner plans to current events. I appreciate that, I said. I've been working with some excellent business consultants. Very experienced people. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course. Though sometimes there's no substitute for family perspective. Family perspective. From people who were currently in the process of squandering the largest windfalls of their lives. As I drove home that night, I realized we'd reached a turning point. The desperation was no longer theoretical. They needed jobs, needed income, needed stability. And I was the only person in their orbit who could provide those things. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that it was almost dizzying. A year ago, I was the family disappointment who couldn't be trusted to contribute meaningfully to dinner conversation. Now I was their potential salvation. The irony was delicious, but I wasn't quite ready to taste it yet. The official approach came in January, wrapped in the language of family reconciliation and mutual benefit. Patricia called first, her voice warm with the kind of artificial affection that probably worked better before I'd spent a year watching her fake concern for Grandpa's legacy. "Callie, darling, I was hoping we could have lunch, just the two of us. I feel like we haven't really talked in ages." We met at a restaurant she chose, expensive enough to maintain appearances, but not so expensive that she couldn't afford it. Yet. "You look wonderful," she said as I sat down. "Success really suits you." Success. Interesting how quickly her attitude toward my achievements had evolved once she realized I held all the cards. "Thank you. How are you managing everything?" "Oh, you know how it is with property management. Always something that needs attention." She laughed lightly, but there was strain underneath. "Actually, that's part of what I wanted to discuss with you. Here we go. I've been thinking about the future of the family business. Morrison and Associates has such potential, and I'd love to be more involved." "Involved how?" "Well, I have extensive experience in hospitality management. I thought perhaps there might be opportunities in client relations or event coordination. I could help you expand the company's social presence." Social presence. From someone whose idea of networking was complaining about service staff at the country club. "What kind of role were you thinking?" I asked. "Something senior level, naturally. I mean, I do bring decades of management experience. Management experience. Managing household staff and organizing charity luncheons wasn't exactly the same as running a multi-million-dollar corporation, but I appreciated her confidence. "I'd be happy to discuss opportunities," I said carefully, "though any position would need to go through our standard hiring process." Her smile faltered slightly. "Hiring process?" "Background checks, interviews with the management team, salary negotiations based on relevant experience, standard business practices. But surely, given our family relationship, especially given our family relationship, everything needs to be completely professional and above board." The lunch continued with Patricia delicately probing for information about the company's financial status, growth projections, and expansion plans. She asked questions about my management style, my long-term vision, and whether I'd considered bringing in experienced partners. Partners? Right. By the time we got to dessert, she'd essentially pitched herself as my business mentor, my strategic advisor, and my entree into the city's professional social circles. "Family business partnerships can be so rewarding," she concluded, "when everyone brings their strengths to the table." "Absolutely," I agreed. "Though it's important that everyone understands their role and contributes appropriately." 3 days later, Lily called with a similar agenda, though her approach was more direct. "Cal, I think we should talk about the company." "What about it?" "Well, it's a family business, right? And I'm family. I think I could bring a lot to the table." "Such as?" "My MBA, for starters. And I've got real-world experience with startups and investment strategies." Real-world experience. That was certainly one way to describe losing your entire inheritance to cryptocurrency scams. "What kind of position interests you?" "I was thinking something in strategic development, maybe a vice president role. I mean, I've been preparing for this my whole life." Vice president. She wanted to start at the top of a company she'd never worked for, in an industry she didn't understand, based on credentials that included an MBA and a track record of financial disasters. "That's certainly ambitious," I said. "I know it sounds like a big jump, but family businesses are different. There's an understanding, a trust level that you can't get with outside hires." Trust level. From someone who'd spent years telling anyone who'd listen that I didn't have what it took to succeed in the real world. "I'll definitely keep that in mind," I said. "Send me your resume and we'll see what might be available." The conversation ended with Lily promising to put together a comprehensive proposal for how she could contribute to the company's growth. I was genuinely curious to see what she'd come up with. By February, I'd received similar calls from 3 cousins, Uncle Richard and even Aunt Margaret, who lived 2 states away and hadn't spoken to me in 5 years. They all had the same basic pitch: family loyalty, unique qualifications, and absolute certainty that they could help take Morrison and Associates to the next level. What none of them had was any realistic understanding of what the company actually did, what skills were needed, or what I might expect from potential employees. They wanted positions, not jobs. They wanted salaries, not responsibilities. And they all seemed to think that sharing DNA with Grandpa qualified them for senior management roles in a business they'd never shown interest in when it might actually require work. The moment of truth came in March, when I called a family meeting to address all the employment inquiries I'd been receiving. We gathered in the conference room at Morrison & Associates, my conference room in my building, discussing my business. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone, especially me. I appreciate everyone's interest in joining the company, I began, setting a stack of job applications on the table. I've reviewed all the resumes and proposals you've submitted. The energy in the room was electric with anticipation. They were probably already planning their office layouts and calculating their salaries. However, I need to clarify a few things about how Morrison & Associates operates. Patricia leaned forward, her expression encouraging. Of course, dear, we're all ears. First, this is a professional business environment. Every employee, regardless of their relationship to me, is expected to meet specific performance standards. There are no exceptions for family members. Nods all around. They could handle performance standards. They were high achievers after all. Second, all positions are earned through qualifications and experience, not relationships or inheritance status. We hire based on what someone can contribute, not who they're related to. More nods, though I noticed some shifting in chairs. Third, anyone interested in working here would start at entry-level positions appropriate to their experience in this industry. The nodding stopped. Entry-level? Lily asked. But I have an MBA. From a good school, I agreed. But no experience in commercial construction consulting, which is what we do. You'd need to learn the business from the ground up. How long would that take? Uncle Richard asked. For someone with no industry experience, 3 to 5 years to reach mid-management, 8 to 10 years for senior positions. Silence. What about compensation? Patricia asked carefully. I slid salary ranges across the table. These are starting salaries for entry-level positions. Lily stared at the numbers like they were written in a foreign language. This is less than I made at my last job. Which lasted how long? I asked gently. The silence stretched longer this time. Look, I said, I'm not trying to be difficult, but Morrison & Associates has a reputation to maintain. Our clients trust us because we deliver results. I can't compromise that by creating positions for unqualified people even if they're family. Unqualified? Patricia's voice climbed an octave. I think that's a bit harsh. Is it? What experience do any of you have in commercial consulting? What industry connections do you bring? What specific skills would benefit our current client base? No answers. I'm happy to consider applications for appropriate positions, I continued. But this isn't a charity. It's a business, and it's successful because we maintain professional standards. The meeting devolved from there. Accusations of selfishness, ingratitude, and family betrayal flew around the room like confetti at a bitter divorce party. We supported you when you had nothing, Lily said, her voice sharp with anger. When? I asked simply. When exactly did you support me? That question hung in the air like smoke from a fire nobody wanted to acknowledge. As they filed out of the conference room, I realized something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in my life, I'd said no to my family and meant it. It felt terrifying and liberating in equal measure. The next day, I received a text from Patricia. We need to discuss your attitude toward family. I replied, I agree. My attitude has definitely changed. Because it had. I was no longer willing to pretend that blood relations automatically created obligations or that family loyalty was a one-way street. The little girl who'd spent years trying to earn her place at their table was gone. In her place was a woman who owned the table, the chairs, and the entire restaurant. 6 months later, the consequences of my new boundaries were playing out exactly as I'd expected. Lily never did submit an application for that entry-level position. Apparently, the idea of learning a business from the bottom up was too degrading for someone with her education and natural leadership abilities. Instead, she'd taken a job with a marketing firm that paid half what she'd wanted from Morrison & Associates and offered none of the prestige she'd been counting on. It's just temporary, she told people, until better opportunities open up. Everyone knew what better opportunities meant, and everyone knew they weren't coming. Patricia had lasted exactly 2 weeks before withdrawing her application for our client relations position. The salary was insultingly low, and the idea of reporting to Margaret Hopkins, a woman 15 years younger with actual industry experience, was apparently beneath her dignity. She'd been forced to sell the Martha's Vineyard house in April. The new roof, heating system repairs, and mounting property taxes had eaten through more of her inheritance than she'd anticipated. The sale price barely covered her debts. It's probably for the best, she said when the closing went through. I never really had time to enjoy it properly. Time, right, because managing a business that generated millions in annual revenue left me so much leisure time. Uncle Richard had given up on the investment club after losing another $40,000. He'd taken a position with a financial services firm, earning a fraction of what he'd expected his inheritance to support. The commute was terrible, the office was cramped, and his supervisor was young enough to be his daughter. "It's humbling," he admitted during one family gathering, "but I suppose everyone needs to learn new things." Humbling. There was a word that had never appeared in their vocabulary before their bank balances started shrinking. The really beautiful part was watching them try to maintain their old social circles while their financial situations deteriorated. Country club memberships had been quietly dropped. Charity board positions were temporarily stepped back from. Expensive restaurants were replaced by casual dining establishments. Meanwhile, Morrison and Associates had completed the Chicago partnership deal, expanded into a second market, and increased our revenue by 80% over 2 years. I'd been featured on the cover of the Regional Business Today magazine as Young Executive of the Year. The article mentioned my family business background, my innovative approach to client relationships, and my vision for sustainable growth in the commercial consulting sector. It did not mention that I'd inherited the company from a grandfather who'd been systematically excluded from family decision-making for years. I framed a copy of the magazine cover and hung it in my office, right where clients could see it during meetings. The final domino fell in October, when Lily showed up at my condo unannounced. She looked tired in a way that expensive makeup couldn't hide, and her usual confidence had been replaced by something that resembled humility. "Can we talk?" she asked. I let her in, curious to see what this conversation would bring. "I owe you an apology," she said without preamble, "for a lot of things. Such as? For assuming you didn't have what it takes to run a business. For thinking I deserved opportunities I hadn't earned. For treating you like you were less capable than the rest of us." It was a more honest conversation than we'd had in years, possibly ever. She admitted that losing over half her inheritance to bad investments had forced her to face some uncomfortable truths about her abilities, her judgment, and her understanding of how the real world actually worked. "I thought having money would make everything easier," she said. "But it turns out that knowing how to manage money is completely different from just having it." "Yes," I said. "It is. You figured that out. I didn't." We talked for 2 hours about success, failure, family expectations, and the difference between deserving something and earning it. It was the first genuine conversation we'd had since we were children. As she was leaving, Lily paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Grandpa was right about you. You were always the one who understood what mattered." After she left, I sat in my living room thinking about how completely the world had shifted. The family members who'd spent years dismissing my potential were now asking for my guidance. The business they'd considered beneath their attention had become their only hope for financial stability. And me? I was no longer the family disappointment hoping for acceptance. I was the family success story, setting my own terms. Today marks exactly 3 years since that yellow envelope changed everything. 3 years since I walked out of that lawyer's office thinking Grandpa had forgotten me, not realizing he'd actually saved me. I'm sitting in my new office, the executive suite we added during our latest expansion, looking out at a view of the city skyline that still takes my breath away. On my desk is a photo of Grandpa and me from 3 years ago, taken during one of those afternoons when I helped him organize his files while everyone else was too busy for such mundane tasks. He's smiling in that photo, and now I understand why. He already knew what he'd planned. He already knew that the granddaughter everyone dismissed would end up holding all the cards. Morrison and Associates employs 28 people now. We have expanded into 2 additional markets and maintain contracts with some of the largest corporations in the region. Last month, the Regional Business magazine listed us among the fastest-growing companies in our sector. The family? They're surviving, mostly. Lily found her footing at a nonprofit where her organizational skills actually matter, and she seems genuinely happy for the first time in years. Patricia has adapted to a more modest lifestyle and recently started volunteering with a literacy program. Uncle Richard discovered he's actually good at financial planning when he's working with other people's money, instead of trying to get rich quick with his own. They still don't fully understand what happened, how the quiet granddaughter who never spoke up at family gatherings turned out to be the one with real business instincts, how the art history major became more successful than all their MBAs and investment strategies combined. But I understand. Grandpa spent years watching this family treat success as something they deserved rather than something they earned. He watched them plan for inheritance while ignoring the work that created the wealth they expected to receive. And he watched me show up, help out, and ask for nothing in return. That yellow envelope wasn't an oversight or a cruel joke. It was the final test in a game I didn't even know I was playing. While everyone else was focused on the will reading and calculating their windfalls, Grandpa was observing their reactions to my apparent exclusion. They failed that test spectacularly. Not one person in that room questioned why I'd been left out. Not one person suggested that maybe there was more to the story. They just accepted that the family disappointment had received appropriately disappointing treatment. Their assumptions revealed everything Grandpa needed to know about their character, their values, and their understanding of what family loyalty actually means. The phone number in that envelope led to Mr. Whitfield, who'd been waiting patiently for my call with documents that would transform my life. But more than that, it led to the realization that I'd been preparing for this responsibility my entire life without knowing it. Every afternoon, organizing Grandpa's papers taught me about business operations. Every family gathering where I listened instead of talking taught me about strategy and negotiation. Every year of being underestimated taught me the value of patience and careful planning. I wasn't overlooked in that will. I was chosen, specifically and deliberately chosen by a man who understood that leadership isn't about demanding respect. It's about earning it. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd never made that phone call. If I'd thrown away the envelope and accepted that even Grandpa didn't think I measured up. The family would have spent their inheritances anyway, made the same bad decisions, ended up in the same financial trouble. But I would have missed the chance to discover what I was actually capable of achieving. The best part isn't the money, though financial security is nice after years of watching every dollar. It isn't even the success of the business, though building something meaningful is deeply satisfying. The best part is knowing that the family member they thought would amount to nothing became the one who amounts to everything. The granddaughter they treated like a burden became the one carrying the family legacy forward. Grandpa Harold Morrison spent 40 years building a company that would outlast him. In the end, he didn't leave it to the person who talked the most about deserving it. He left it to the person who actually understood what it meant. That yellow envelope taught me the most important lesson of my life. Sometimes the people who underestimate you are giving you the greatest gift possible. They're lowering expectations so much that when you finally show them what you're capable of, the impact is absolutely devastating. I learned that lesson well, and I'll never forget it. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more incredible stories of family drama, unexpected inheritance twists, and the sweet taste of well-deserved success. You won't believe some of the other stories I have to share.